Seek Sustainable Japan. I'm JJWalsh in Hiroshima, and today I have the pleasure of talking with David Caprara. Thank you so much for joining, David.
Hey, JJ.
It's great to have you. Now, you have been in Japan for about 12 years, is that right?
I was taking a walk the other day, and it kind of hit me. It's been about a third of my life that I've been here in Japan, and I count. There's 3 years of that where I was in New York. I was working for Japanese media, eating Japanese bentos around the block every day. So still within the gravitational pull of Japan. But I first came here in 2012.
Wow, that's amazing. And you started as a jet, like many of us do.
Yep, started as a jet. At that time I was very interested in Asian culture, kind of as a whole. But I hadn't really pinpointed on Japan yet. And I was kind of frantically Google searching what to do with my life after graduating, a major in religious studies and psychology. And, rather than, decide my future with Google, I bought a backpack, traveled around the world. And while in Nepal, I remembered the words of a Japan professor I had that was recommending the JET program. So I actually applied in Nepal. Got in, and I got placed here in Nara, in the next door village to where I am now in Kawakami. And it was a really life-changing experience. Ever since then, everything I've done has been within the pull of Japan.
Wow, that's amazing. And even when you were in the States, in New York and then DC, you were still doing Japan-related communications work with the U.S.-Japan relations in DC, and then, like you said, with NHK World in New York. How fun to see it from both the inside and the outside. That must be really interesting.
Yeah. So the first gig I got, I returned. I was 2 years as a jet in this little tiny village, Kawakami in Nara Prefecture in the Yoshino region. And I'm in Yoshino now. It's the same kind of the gun or county. I got back, and like many jets, I immediately felt this reverse culture shock, and just like, how do I get back to Japan? I loved it here. Was thinking of how to do that. The first gig I got going back, it was actually U.S.-Japan Council, and they're very involved with U.S.-Japan relations. I was just an intern at the time, but I hopped in at kind of the perfect time. This was when Shinzo Abe was making his White House visit to the U.S. And Kishida just had his last visit, his visit last week. This was the last one before that. So I was their photographer, filming Obama and Abe on the White House lawn. And after that, I'll give you the concise version, but in between a lot of freelance, I got into Japanese media and in New York. Before that, I was in Nepal and Greece doing stuff on earthquake coverage, cultural coverage, and refugee crisis in Greece. That's the abridged version. Maybe the rest is for another podcast. In the U.S., I started with Tokyo Shimbun, which is also Chunichi Shimbun, Tokyo Shimbun. It's the same paper. Then migrated from print to broadcast with NHK, Japan's public broadcaster. And I tell people it was kind of like being a foreign correspondent in my own country. And I'm born and raised in the U.S. And it was this moment, this huge shifts in the U.S. The 2016 political election had taken place, and we were basically going around the country in a very just kind of all around asking people, how do you feel? What is the U.S. like? And I think working in U.S. media, I think a lot of people's reactions would have been, what's your bias or what's your slant? But having worked for foreign media in the U.S., it immediately disarmed people, and I could really kind of get a very interesting slice of what the U.S. was reporting news for Japanese viewers. So it was a pretty life-changing experience, in addition to just a good reporting experience. Yeah.
And you've also, you do martial arts. It looks like you've done a little bit of Yamabushi training with the mountain monks. So you've seen kind of the deep Japanese culture experience as well as a part of living in Japan. And I'm sure that informs how you write articles, how you research things, how you plan your documentaries as a director, right?
Definitely, yeah. In terms of martial arts these days, it's mostly nominally. I was pretty into Chinese kung fu that kind of developed in Indonesia, in the U.S., but that was like my college years. Here, I did kendo for a few years, and I was not did not get very far, but I saw it as kind of a like Japanese charm school kind of, where they're just kind of teaching the manners and conduct and how to follow kind of a path where you're always trying to improve. Definitely impacts who I am. Yamabushi actually is something different. It's not a martial arts, but it's actually a form of these mountain aesthetics, these Buddhists, and that is something that I do. And there's a picture. Yeah, that's so it's Shugendo Buddhism. It's I describe it as kind of an expansion pack upon regular Buddhism is a core, or double espresso Buddhism, where it's kind of about going through different experiences, like and just trying to kind of connect with nature and see how that alters your kind of worldview and things. Not really a strict belief system. I wouldn't really consider myself religious by any means. A lot of people come here, and I speak to people who kind of think that the Shugendo or Buddhism or religion is kind of religion in general is about like a superstition or fear of death or something. But I'm not really afraid at all, or I don't really think at all much about that kind of stuff. I don't really think I believe in anything as much as just experiencing and trying to relate that to nature and just kind of going through things. But the bare minimum of what I do with Shugendo once a month, I wake up at like 5 a.m, drive out and do waterfall meditation with a bunch of other guys practicing this. Then we do, you had a picture earlier of these fire rituals. And yeah, it's fun. I mean, to quote the great Alan Watts, I mean, he basically said that spirituality should feel fun, and if it's not, don't do it. And that's kind of how I feel. I mean, it's my Disney World. I enjoy doing it, and I try to take what you like, put aside what you don't like. But yeah, it's fun.
It's nice to see. We're going to talk about your Akiya. That's the reason we're able to talk this week, is because I'm moderating the panel at the Minka Summit that you're a part of. And so it was so fun to connect and be able to talk about your other work as well. Connected back to the Yamabushi, is this someone blessing your house?
Yep, that is my Shugendo teacher, and that is the house blessing ceremony. So and many different levels. Simply put, it's not just buying the whole Akiya movement. It's more than just buying like a property or something. It's kind of really more than just like a financial investment or something. It's kind of connecting with the community and treating a house is, I mean, traditionally in Japan, a house, maybe in other places in the world too, it's almost like a living organism that you're respecting, you're putting love into, inviting people over. It's not your house with your stamp and this little isolated thing. Really, it's kind of this place where the entire community can come, and I try to maintain that. So yeah, that picture you had was of a house blessing ceremony. It was kind of to say thank you to the ancestors and people that had lived in this house before me, and to kind of the Buddhist way of popping a bottle of champagne and saying, here's to another 100 years in this house.
That's wonderful. And I love that I'm doing another panel with Shelley Clark and a few other people about how you respect the heritage of your house. And you really have some great connections to that as well. You've kept some beautiful old photos that you shared with us. Is this your house?
That's it.
Years ago?
Yep. So this house is, so there's a word in Japanese, two kind of buzzwords right now is Minka and Kominka or Akiya. Akiya means abandoned house, like open house. Kominka is old house in these traditional forms. I say that this house is a shin kominka, like a new kominka. This house doesn't necessarily fit into the kominka. It was built in 1957, and that photo is undated, but I'm assuming was probably somewhere around that period, maybe the late 50s or 60s. So yeah, there's even though this house is not hundreds of years old, it still is really like a time capsule of this other era. And these houses that you can get in Japan, these Akiya that people have become obsessed with, you can, get them for very cheap prices. And there's a lot of articles written about this online and how much of a steal people are getting these for. This house, fortunately, I think a lot of circumstances just kind of came to place where, it didn't need much repairs. It was just a really beautiful place. I bought it from two brothers who didn't have children, and they both, as soon as they left high school, they just got out of here and never came back. So this house was abandoned for a number of years, and it was just kind of a mutually really good experience for both ends. They themselves just kind of, feeling like your house that you're born in is abandoned and just growing weeds, and financially, like, you're paying tax money on this and money to cut the weeds and things. But to feel like you're kind of passing the baton on to someone, ideally, it's not just like a money transaction. But I really, told them and expressed in many different types of ways, I want to be kind of the next carrier of the torch of this house, and to sort of honor the memories that were had here, the traditions, to kind of preserve this as much as possible. And architecturally too, it's just not 200, 300-year-old cultural heritage, but this is really like taking a time machine back to the Showa era. It's very different being inside here than what you'd see in a place in Tokyo or any modern city in Japan.
Yeah, you talk about it being a long, slow process. That is often talked about by people who really want to be active and proactive part of the community. So is this a place that you were first a jet and then you kept up with the area over the years? You said eventually you got it on the Akiya bank, so you looked in a few different ways of looking at houses, did you?
Yeah. So in terms of things moving slowly in Japan, this is true for buying a house or, really anything, for video production world and anything, take in your mind the longest possible time it could take to do something and to double that. And that's usually around how long it takes. For, people just love to get together and have these uchiwases where you're drinking tea and kind of talking things over many steps. This idea of just making things easier by sending emails isn't really a thing here. But, you kind of grow to like it. I kind of really do enjoy these kind of face-to-face interactions. And if you're not in a rush, and what is the big rush? Really, I think it's, kind of take things step by step. But so yeah, how I ended up in this area where I was living in Kawakami. I was in New York. I'll tell you the story of how I got obsessed with this. As a jet in 2013, I attended there's these talks called TEDx, which I'm sure many of your viewers are familiar with. I went to TedXKyoto and watched a talk by a man named Kerr. And it just completely changed my life. Alex told this story, and he's one who comes to this Minka summit every year. I don't think he's gonna be able to come this year, but he's become sort of like a mentor to me in this whole idea of renovating these houses. He gave this talk about how he I believe it was the 1970s, he had bought a farmhouse, and just his story of how he loved this place and renovated it. And I just became obsessed with that. And I went back to, not really thinking how I could do it. I was in my early 20s as a jet, but I went back to New York, and I was, I had a good job. I was in, working in the city and stuff, but I was just, working in this 9 to 5 job in these skyscrapers every day. I think you start to think about different ways to live. And I was reflecting back upon my time in Asia and Japan a lot. So I found these different communities, one online, to see kind of different ways people were living. One of which was called Hacker Farm out in Chiba Prefecture. I think it was Kamogawa is the name of the town where that is. And it was made by a number of people who are working in IT, and they basically could take their work remotely. So they did. They moved to the countryside. They had quadrupled or multiplied times 100 the living space that they had. And the time in the day, take away the commute and take away all of these stresses of the city, very low living costs. This was kind of a eureka moment to me, where maybe living in the countryside and renting or buying an Akiya, this could be the ticket to get out of this treadmill of capitalism that we kind of get stuck in the city. Ticket away from the rat race. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds. That picture on the screen is where I am now. So I went back to Japan in 2019 without a visa or a return ticket. I basically came as a tourist with a big backpack, and I quit my job in New York at NHK, and I said they all thought I was crazy, and yeah, maybe I was, but I just thought I'll make something happen in Japan. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe the end of my 3 months, I'll just have to come back, but I'm going to figure it out. So I went back. I traveled to this place in Hacker Farm, met some people around there, and saw this great life that they were living, and kind of this integration between these very advanced communities working with IT, and kind of at the the pinnacle of where we're at now with remote work and different types of freelance work and things. And this handshake between that and these very traditional, like centuries old ways of life was just this beautiful thing to me. And in the meantime, I found this program that is not very well advertised, but here I go, government of Japan, you get your plug. There's really no information about this on English, but this was made by Japan's Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. I believe that's the English term. And doesn't have an English name, but it's kind of Japan's version of what in the US is called the Peace Corps, kind of a domestic volunteer program. I would call it Japanicorps, but there's no English name for it. It's called the Chiki Okoshi Kyotokutai in Japanese. And it's basically just like JET. Every situation is completely different depending on where you're placed. I had reached out about this to people that were in this program in Kawahami, where I was living. And I found this program, and because Kawahami is so extreme situation, I'll tell you how extreme but I looked at the data at that time. Between the year 2018 and 2045, the government of Japan projected them as being the number one most declining population in all of Japan. So this is the number one most screwed village in terms of population, and yet here they are. They're still continuing on. And what is my way to kind of help and to be a part of this, and also integrate this with this idea of living in the countryside, working remotely, and doing journalism. And I was doing breaking news, 24-hour news, and in New York. But I wanted to take a step back and make my own films and to kind of do slower news. So yes, there's not many people to interview in the middle of nowhere. Actually, I found that to be untrue. Maybe we'll get into that later. But slow news, documentary, making your own films and things, that's something you very much can do remotely. Anywhere you have an internet connection, you can do that kind of thing. So me and my partner, my now wife, we're both doing video, and we're sending hard drives back and forth across the world. And it's worked pretty well. And I found this program, and basically the contents of it, where you can do anything you want, really, as long as it relates to the village. So in my situation, I said filmmaking. So I basically used it as like a fellowship. And it was kind of a weird Japanese experiment with UBI / a cross between that and a kind of Peace Corps like volunteer program, but basically very hands off. I was my own boss and in charge of my own video work. They just kind of let me do my thing and paid me peanuts to keep the roof over my head. But yeah, it was a really great time. I was able to continue work with international outlets like Vice News throughout that entire time. And I guess looking back, I made it work. But yeah, after that, I found this place, and now I'm just fully doing my own thing.
Wow, that's awesome. Is that where you made the Yoshino Ringyo film about the forestry?
That is it. So that is one film that I thought was online with a paywall on Vimeo, but it appears my account has expired on there. I want to kind of just open that up and make it so anybody can watch it. But that film, so Ringyo means forestry in Japanese, and this area in Japan is known for its forestry. So there's these, you meet people in Japan, not just here, but all around Japan. One reason I love this country is you'll meet people who are like master tea makers or lumberjacks, and they'll say, yeah, my father did this and my grandfather did this. And actually, I'm the 14th generation so-and-so. And that's not like a very rare claim to find someone that's like 5 generations or 7 generations doing the same thing. Maybe it's exaggerated. It's case by case, I'm sure. But this in this area, Yoshino is known for forestry in Japan for at least 500 years in the Muromachi, what's known as the Muromachi era or Jidai in Japan. And this film kind of attempts to, there hasn't been much about this in the English language and much access. And I just kind of wanted, I was, when I first came to Kawahami, I was living in this share house, and my roommate was a lumberjack. And that was him, this young guy in his early 30s. And I just heard about the way that he entered the woods every day. And that was at like 5 a.m, just kind of riding this little like monorail thing up into the hills. It was a really interesting, me just coming straight from Manhattan. This was just a very interesting world. And I already had the kind of backstory behind this is I already had tickets for a director of photography that was coming here. We made a documentary that basically, when I came back here from New York, it was with this backpack full of dreams, but also an idea to make this documentary, Horimono, which was a documentary about tattoo culture in Japan. And this documentary, Japan's a country with over, over 100 years, around 150 years plus history of tattooing. However, it's one of the countries with the heaviest taboos against taboo, and there's kind of associations with organized crime. In our film, some of our subjects argue that might have been influenced. Proud to have done. And I realize I'm kind of rambling. I forgot what.
That's okay. It's all connected. I wanted to ask you all about it.
Everything. Yeah, forgot.
I love people who are comfortable on camera. You're obviously very comfortable. Yeah. But I mean, you've done everything. You were a reporter, you're a photographer, you do video, you do directing, you do producing. What is your favorite part of all this work? Do you have one favorite?
Yeah. I mean, if someone asks me what's your job? I mean, on my business card, it says journalist or producer. Is usually my role that I have working with media companies. But part of this comes from a really, I can't sit still, and I want to constantly improve. Anytime I feel like I'm plateauing, I want to kind of shake that. Like, how can I get a different perspective, and how can I do something new? So I want to, on one side, I want to always challenge myself and try different things. And when you meet people that have been with media outlets working their 9-to-5 job, much respect, doing that for 25 years plus of these older generations and things. But I think that when you make your own company or something, or you set out to do things, and you're forced to be behind the editor's chair and the camera sometimes, and in front of the cameras and other times, you kind of learn all of these skills, and it makes you kind of a more well-rounded person. So there's benefits to that, but and that's part of the reason why I have tried so many roles. But the other is just out of how this journalism industry has just completely fallen out of the sky and kind of exploded on the ground. It's really, I don't mean to be dramatic. Maybe it's an understatement, though. I mean, it's really tough times in the journalism industry. There's a lot of scholars that look at what happened in the early 2000s with the internet overtaking, a lot this major collapse of a lot of local newspapers throughout the United States. They describe it as a mass extinction event. I think that's an accurate description. And I think that that's also true with broadcast now. Everyone is shifting to the internet and, watching traditional news less and less. There's some benefits to that. Who's allowed to be the gatekeeper and who's allowed to, curate information and share it with the public. So there are some benefits to these technological advances we have that enable, for example, this podcast. I mean, this would cost millions of dollars in the 90s. Now here we are, broadcasting this internationally for free. But it's a really big challenge. And one example of that, so for my work, I was a producer with CBS News's Tokyo bureau, sort of on what's called a permalance basis, where I was basically working with them pretty much pretty regularly for about a year. But they, as of this month, the bureau chief told everyone the Tokyo bureau of CBS News is closing down effective immediately after 60 years, just about 60 years of reporting news from Japan. And yeah, that's kind of the only permanent footing they had in Asia. So I guess Asia is not important anymore. I mean, it's really incredible, these giants that are collapsing in the media industry. So why do I do all this directing and cinematography, production, and all these things? On one end, all of these giants collapsing and all these full-time staff going with them creates a lot of opportunities for freelance. But on the other hand, I mean, maybe there would be actually like full-time jobs and with more work with protections and things if there weren't all these freelance jobs available. So there is this liberalization, and there is, all of these entrepreneurial experiences created if you can kind of build a niche for yourself. But the downside is, I think that ultimately there's just less stories that are going to be told as people choose different careers. I'll give you. I'll end this with one statistic I found recently. The Pew Research Center, they conducted a survey in 2022, and they found that 74% of journalists surveyed in the United States indicated that they were extremely or very proud of the work that they do. I feel that way. But in the same survey, 77% said that they would choose their career all over again if they had the opportunity to do so. And that's really depressing. And I think that there's, journalists to be able to continue on and tell these really important stories around the world. It's very important to, bridge this world and share stories and what it means to be a human being in this era. For me, buying a Minka, an Akiya or Kaminka or old Japanese house, that really fits into that. This kind of became my little island from which I kind of travel around like a bee and cross-pollinate and report all throughout the Asia Pacific region. I think that this idea of, having a foothold in Japan, for me, this Kominka or old house is something that was, pretty integral to that.
That's so important. And you've got so many great examples of how you're documenting the previous owner's history and heritage as a part of you taking over the house and that responsibility. I see so many examples in your work of how you're trying to be a responsible storyteller, doing your research, giving even hands to both sides. We need reporters like you, David, so much more than ever right now. It's crazy that legitimate journalism is dying out at this time when we have so much misinformation. We need people who do research and really are talking about what they know about, not just sponsored content, right?
Yeah, I will include my link to my Venmo account if you all want to wire money my way. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, I do really think that this is an important thing. I mean, just what journalism is. I mean, for a lot of people, so on one hand, for some people, it's a 9-to-5 job and just another way to put bread on the table. But I think that for people that are really passionate about telling stories, I mean, it's about pushing yourself into situations and kind of sharing perspectives that you don't get, in your regular life, and just kind of expanding people's views of the world and inspiring them. We're all on our own journeys and we're all on our own paths, and no one is going to replicate the life of another individual. But hearing other people's stories and their inspirations and the things they've overcome can also inspire us. So I think, telling stories like that instead of ones that, sow division or just get clicks and things, I think it's really, important to have journalists out there. Washington
Absolutely. And the work that you've done is your brand to be building on and have people trust you because of the stories you've already told. One story we haven't told yet, which I really wanted to talk about, it's really powerful, was the work that you did on the American pilots who crashed in the mountains not far from where you're living, right?
Yeah. So that of all the stories I've done so far, that's the one that took the most, just completely took over my life, and I just had to get every little scrap of anything I could find on it. So this was with basically when I moved back to Kawakami in 2019. This village, they said, you know, we got a few houses available. There's not too much ready to go, but here's this one, and there's this house. I can see this mountain in the distance, and I kind of felt a connection, and I like mountains, nice view. And I said, okay, this is the one we live in. So I tell this to a friend who is, you know, a long-term resident there, and he's like, oh, that's the house you can see at Mount Omine. And I said, and that's, you know, that's where I found the engine. And I'm like, the engine, like what engine? And he said, so this guy is a former, Japan does not have an army, but they have what's called the self-defense force, the Jeitai. And he was a member of this, and on a rescue mission, someone had gotten lost. They went to find them, and just by chance, he stumbled into an engine with his rescue crew in the 1980s. Basically, that's all he knew. That was kind of the end of the story, and as much as he knew. So I immediately took to Google and I said, Omine crash, and nothing showed up. So I became very interested at that point. So I filed records requests with the U.S. National Archives, which is a very difficult process in that most of what they have has not been put online. And it's like this game of Battleship where you're you know, you're basically, you have to input, if you know that something happened and you're looking for it, you're good. But if you don't know, you have to basically give them precisely what's going to be on the file. Otherwise, you're not going to get a return. And I did end up getting a return. I have these classified documents from 1945, hundreds of pages documenting this B-29 crash that took place. This plane had been on a bombing mission. There was 11 Americans on board. This plane crashed into not only what is aesthetically a very beautiful and mountain in this area, but a Shugendo Buddhist holy mountain. It's kind of the most, you know, Nara's most revered Buddhist holy mountain. It crashed right onto the side of this, and you know, through this, maybe the details of this is for another podcast. I could talk for hours about this, but I basically tracked down a lot of documents from the U.S. National Archives. I interviewed a lot of people in Japan who had seen the crash take place when they were children and saw these POWs, these Americans that had parachuted out and were captured. And what's very interesting is as we move forward in time from this event in World War II, less and less survivors remain. However, technology increases more and more such that through the powers of the internet and the searching abilities, you're able to do all kinds of archival research would have taken, you know, hundreds of people to do in the past. So I would find like obituary records and archival newspapers in the U.S., and I would track down, you know, who, you know, family members of these individuals that had died, and basically, you know, through mailing out physical letters and archival documents, I was able to track down family members of all 11 of these flyers, and do like Zoom interviews with them. And I met some of them in person in the U.S. And one of them really kind of gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, just they lived walking distance from my grandmother, and they knew like this area that she was living in and everything. But that was, we're just really kind of bonding, you know, this story connecting the U.S. and Japan. And eventually a producer friend of mine at NHK took up on this, and NHK kind of followed this process, and it turned into an NHK World documentary, which is available online, called The Fallen Fortress. You can watch it for free. But yeah, my big takeaway there is that the past never dies. I mean, I always thought of World War II as this, you know, omukashi mukashi, way in the past thing that's completely, you know, disconnected from our life today. But yeah, now I really just feel, you know, not only World War II, but all kinds of events in the past, they both create the fabric of the society that we live in now, and it's still very much alive in a lot of very real ways. But to be able to kind of remove myself from, identifying as an American or, whatever identifier, just kind of look at it objectively and what kind of things can be healed through covering this. That's kind of what I tried to do with that story, and any story is just kind of like, what's the thing that can be benefited, or what's the thing that people can take away and learn? That's kind of the heart that I tried to capture in it.
Yeah, it is. It is such a beautiful, well done documentary. I enjoyed the NHK show really, and I love what you said in it and how you help the American families find closure at the end, but also how you were trying to balance it with talking with locals about the bombings in Osaka, and from both sides. And I love when you say we can't decide who's right or wrong after the war. That's what continues wars. Most important to have forgiveness and realize everyone has pain. And I just found it really powerful. I'm in Hiroshima as an American. I do tours for international visitors here. It's always powerful. So this story I'd never heard of, and it's really an important part of the wartime and moving on even now, right? It's still relevant, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, and Hiroshima, what a city to be in. But is for Americans, they might not know what Hiroshima is like today, and that's all they know is this big word. I've been there a few times, but I was. But the takeaway that I have visiting Hiroshima is just how beautiful of a city it is, and it's how green and lush and just alive, and how this horrible event and this war that took over all of Japan was kind of one scar, but it's not what defines Hiroshima by any means. I mean, there's such a long history, and that is not the thing that they choose to define their entire existence. And I find that to be really just showing the endurance of the people there, and kind of what kind of the kind of hearts that the people there have. Really powerful.
Absolutely. And I think you showed that as well. Like what happened to these pilots was horrible, but how the local people reacted to seeing these enemy within their midst, how they gave them food and tried to help them. It was really, really powerful.
Yeah. So basically what happened was there was this plane, 11 men on board, and it it crashed after going over Osaka on this air raid mission. And four people parachuted out. They were captured and ultimately all executed extrajudicially in Osaka. And it was, I mean, the way in which they met their end, this was a part of the Tokyo war trials, and kind of Tokyo's version of the Nuremberg trials. And that's, one reason why there's so much that remains in this in the records, was that it was a part of that. But, while these guys were alive, there's local records and records, from direct interviews, but also written records of ways that people showed them kindness. So one example, and not only was this, on this mountain that was like right in my backyard, basically, but one of them had, his name's Alvin Hart. He actually descended into the village where I was living. And there are stories where he had, the person that initially spotted him, took him into the house, and he knew that the villagers down below, would probably not treat him very kindly. So he took him inside and fed him strawberries from the garden, and kind of let him hang out there and remain, safe, and took care of him. And while they descended again, and this is in the little hamlet where I was living, there was this doctor's clinic, and there was this female doctor at the time who, they had to take care of his wounds. And to think that these Americans had just hours ago were in the sky dropping bombs indiscriminately on Japan, but to show that kind of compassion, that even, even someone who had come here for that reason, we're all kind of swept up in these very, these huge events of the war, but at the end of the day, we're all cut out of the same material, and we're all human. And I think that for people to realize that, war brings out the absolute worst in people and kind of makes you lose hope sometimes. But there's also some of the most, the deepest power of forgiveness, and of being able to, move forward. It can sometimes be shown through war. So sometimes the best parts of humans come out too. And that's what you see on the screen there is a marker where the plane crash took place. So I trekked out there. That marker is no longer there now, but there is another engine remaining in the woods still of where this took place. So I collected messages from all of the family members that I was able to reach, from 11 of the members on board. And I read messages there on behalf of all of these family members with a rescue team and a Shugendo monk that kind of gave a Buddhist blessing over this engine to kind of purify the area. And it was really, really kind of a powerful experience. And I kind of, it's funny, the producer at NHK said, you're both kind of acting as a reporter and also kind of like a shaman in this moment, like bringing these kind of healing and peace in this moment. And I kind of felt that. I mean, it was really, I felt like something, like it was there was no one, to my knowledge, no one had been out there to, pray for these guys and kind of show respects on behalf of their family members. So to do that, it was pretty powerful.
It's really powerful. And quite often, as a reporter or a director or someone behind the lens, but you really became part of the story, and it's where you're living. So you must feel very connected to it where your house is as well. It's not far away, right?
Yeah. So I moved a little bit closer into, so I'm in Yoshino town, within the same Yoshino-gun or county, and I'm in Yoshino town now. But I'm just 20 or 30 minutes down the road still. Probably actually closer to where the mountain is to access that. But yeah, same area. Nara is it's a fun place. I mean, it's this whole story aside, the one thing we're really famous for here in Yoshino is the cherry blossoms. If you'd come a week or two ago, it's the Mount Yoshino. That's a picture of Mount Yoshino that just turns these mountains turn completely pink, just absolutely covered. And people from all around the world coming here. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That and Kimpusenji, the temple at the top, and a really, really beautiful area. And it is remote. I think that living in remote Japan can have its challenges, but compared to places in the U.S., where if you're remote and you're in middle of nowhere, New Mexico, or there are places in the U.S. where you get in a car and you can drive for 4 hours and not see anything but cacti. Here in Japan, it's the Japanese mainland, the main islands strung together is about the size of the U.S. state of California. So anywhere you are in Japan, even if you're remote, if you're about an hour and a half or an hour away from a major city, no matter where you are, my closest city is Osaka or Nara, Kyoto, Nagoya, all kind of in the same area. So it's a place in the countryside with the space of the countryside, the nature, but it's also just a stone's throw away from an international airport and a major city.
That's great. It looks like a beautiful valley that you're in with rice paddies all around you and everything. Can you talk just a little bit about some of the interesting things that you found, the treasures you found in your house that really connected with you as a journalist and photographer as well? There's some great finds there.
Yeah. So this house did not require many. Some people buy these Akiya and they're in need of being complete. They buy them for like $1 or something, and they need to completely redo the entire thing. This situation, I did not have the time or funds to do that. So I was really kind of looking for a place that I can, pretty much just start using. But the big challenge was that the house, had tons of stuff from the previous owner, just like completely stacked up. And these brothers that I was buying it from, their plan was to just throw everything out. And they hired a company, and they said, they gave me the keys, bought the house, and they said, anything you want, you can keep. So I frantically, before this moving company came, or I guess not a moving company, destruction, throwing everything out company. I don't know the word is. I was kind of in here before the electricity was cut on and everything. And my partner, now wife, she was abroad. So I was kind of doing this solo with like a little headlamp going through this, like silently going through all these photos and everything. And I found all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's really like a time capsule. One thing is those are war bonds. We're talking about war. These are, looks like they were bought yesterday, but some of these are war bonds bought during World War II. I found all kinds of photos, and I told these guys, look, I found these photo albums. You got to keep these. And they told me, we don't have kids and we don't have anyone to pass this on to. And when we die, these will just get thrown out by another moving company. But, if you feel like as a journalist, you're able to kind of share these stories and preserve these in some ways, have them, please. You can kind of carry them on. And that is what I'm trying to do. And amazing photos from this era.
I love what's written underneath these photos. She says, "You look so happy" on the left, and then on the right, "Oh, don't you look cute?" Like, it's just these are gems. I love these.
Yeah, and really good. I mean, now we live in an era where everyone's just flipping photos with their iPhones and things. But when it costed money to hire a professional photographer and use professional equipment, photos were taken more seriously, and it shows in these photos. I mean, it just really feels, this photo in particular just really grabbed me. A lot of these photos, they didn't really know who these people were, but most of these photos are from the early 1900s, before the war. No one here in this house. I think people in this, both this house and this street where I'm living, well, for this house anyway, they did not fight abroad during World War II. So there's nothing really connected to that, or kind of painful family histories connected to that living presence in the house. But there was a lot of just like really old things from before the house was built even. So one example is there was these bowls. And there's one of them. We just have dozens of these, and these are from this area that was hit on New Year's Day here in Japan, Wajima, on this earthquake. It's a completely devastated area this year, was hit by this massive earthquake. A lot of people don't know that this area is famous for its urushi lacquerware. And that's what that bowl was in this whole set. And we just have tons of those. But people would, traditionally, they get these amazing sets of urushi, and they'd use them like once a year or twice a year, or maybe once in their lifetime for these very special occasions. But one interesting point is what you can't, the best way to take care of urushi is to continue like using it. You don't want it to just like sit there. So we give it a new life. And one interesting thing is they were all wrapped. A lot of them are wrapped in newspaper, this junk newspaper, just to kind of protect it. But the newspaper itself was so old, Showa Ninen, which is 1927. These newspapers from 1927. I'm looking at this this trash from 1927, but it's become treasure. And I'm just looking at all of the things that have happened. These kind of time capsules that are preserved in all these things, and this whole treasure hunt. I mean, itself. I think that buying these Akiya, these abandoned houses in Japan, very cheap. I bought this for like the price of what a car costs in the U.S. Meanwhile, the average price of a house in the U.S., I think the Federal Reserve of St. Louis in 2022 said that the median house of a U.S. House was $500,000 US. So I think this is like 1/20th of what that is. It's just, and it becomes really like a university where these opportunities to learn from the things you inherit, the ways to kind of interact with people, and the ways for the people really involved in DIY, just how much they learn from the love that they put into the house and the work they're putting into the house. You learn a lot from it, and that itself has been worth it for me for sure.
That's awesome. You often have references to how you're trying to be a good member of the community. It looks like you guys are growing things. Tell me a bit about the outdoors. Are you guys gardening, it looks like?
Yeah, so there's a garden. So we have a lot of farmland that we're trying to make use of in various different ways. The first way is just from like a small garden. Those are a ton of yuzu that I love. Yeah, you can make all kinds of stuff with yuzu. And that is the bane of my existence. These Itadori I think is what they're called. These little tiny stems that can be used in cooking. But if you let them grow very quickly, your house will be just like taken over. And it took me, I had like this weed whacker, this metal, like essentially like a chainsaw, and I'm kind of hacking at it because it's
I thought it was bamboo. It's not bamboo.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like bamboo, but it gets thicker than bamboo. And I battled it, and it won. It would like kill this metal chainsaw / weed whacker thing. And so that is a fair warning. So why is these houses are so cheap? House in the US is like $500,000. You can get a house for like the price of a car in Japan or cheaper. Why doesn't everyone just like move to Japan countryside, or buy a house in Japan? So a lot of the reason people buy houses in the US is to make money. You buy in it and it accrues equity over time. Japan, everything you know about homeowning in the US or most Western countries, forget it. Like turn it upside down, and that's how it works here in Japan. Houses in Japan, it's like as soon as you take it off the lot, like a car, it depreciates in value. And with declining population, trends show that might continue to be true. I think it's going to start changing actually with new migrations into Japan and the way that people renovate these houses. But that is, a factor. So it's an interesting factor that filters out who's doing this. You're not just, foreigners. You don't need a residence visa to buy property in Japan. Surprisingly, I think it was until fall of last year, after I bought the house, where they don't even check what your citizenship is buying the house. So that was a big shock. But there is this filter, like people that are just kind of grossly in it to make money. They don't really like play the game because the return on investment isn't very clearly there for them. So you got a lot of people doing this. You kind of have to love Japan and have a passion for it. Another idea is that, just having this idea of this house you can buy to fulfill this thing in your head of, oh, I own a place, but then never touching it or never going there and just kind of having it there. You might be able to do that in like colder areas in like northern US or Canada, or just kind of areas where houses are very sturdily built and nature is a little bit calm. Here, from those pictures of the grass and the animals and things that come, your house will, if you don't cut the grass here, it will turn into Jurassic Park or Jumanji within like a couple weeks. I mean, it's just like completely takes over it. The vines will grab your house and grab you and throw you around. It's intense. I had a little my first weed whacking today, so it takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. But yeah, I think it's worth it. And also just kind of, like what my advice to like people doing this is like, try to think of a plan where it's more than just about yourself and it's about the community. I mean, I wouldn't have done this if I was just thinking of buying a second home for myself. What my whole kind of philosophy behind this is using this as a base that other people can kind of use and gain from, not just myself and this little nuclear bubble, but basically like how I can open this to the world and host events and host people. And as a reporter right now, I'm doing most of my work remotely. But if I am later stages in life, I might have to come and go between here and Tokyo or other places in the Asia Pacific. My family is still in the U.S. I might want to spend some time there in the future. I'm applying for Italian citizenship now. Maybe I have an Italy chapter or something one day. But who knows? But I'm basically trying to set this up in a way where it's not only my project, but it's a way that I can kind of link with other people that they can continue to be a benefit to the community. And, the neighbors, I think that, Japan, there's not a lot of immigration. Only 2% of the population is foreign population here in Japan. But surprisingly, the locals here, just to see a house that had been abandoned and to have lights on and have people that come outside and greet them and, try to be members of the community and try to have, other people kind of coming here too. They're definitely really grateful for that. And, yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's something I wanted to do. My philosophy in life is, if there's something that, I mean, I've been thinking about this for like 10 years and I was kind of on the fence. Like, is this crazy? There's a lot of responsibilities as a journalist. I have physically, I have to be in a lot of different places. Does this make sense? But I have just been thinking about this for like 10 years plus. And if there's something you feel like instinctually really drawn towards, whatever it may be, yeah, do the thing, figure it out, learn from it. If it's dumb, you'll figure that out the hard way. But it's, if you feel like you got to do it, it's better to go through the motions and, go through the game and see what happens.
Well, that's great. And I think you were talking about the hackathon. You were talking about Alex Kerr. There's a lot of shoulders that we're standing on, right? That you have been welcomed in to communities in Japan. You saw how other people were doing it well. And now you're inspiring other people by showing how you can be a part of the community, how you can really make it work and show respect to the previous owners. So many things you're doing. Really wonderful. Thanks so much, David, for joining. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation in the Minka Summit this weekend.
Yeah. So listeners out there, if you want to see the shoulders from which we're all standing on, they're all coming to Hanase and this weekend, the Minka Summit. This is the Woodstock of this new counterculture where everyone crawls out from underneath their rocks and gets together and shares about their communities and what they're doing. I love it. I mean, this is like, really like a family to me. And every time I come back, I mean, it just feels like a giant family reunion. So I'm excited.
Yeah, this will be fantastic. They're expecting more than 500 people. This will be the third time they've done it and the second time back at the first location in Hanase Village in rural Kyoto. So not too far from where you were, right, David?
Yeah, I'm driving, so I've got my podcast ready. If anyone wants to road trip, you got a few extra seats.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for sharing and good luck with all of your projects. I really hope that you can find support. You definitely have viewer support, but I know financial support is also a big part of being able to do these projects and dedicate so much time and research in it. So fingers crossed, and we'll keep our ears open.
Yep.
Let us know your links, and we'll add them below as well to where people can support you and see some of your work.
Sounds good. Thanks for doing this, Joy.
All right. Thanks so much, David. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and see you at the Minka Summit.
See you.
Bye.